Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Book Mecca's Breakthrough Series, where we highlight Black authors from all over the globe, various genres, who are breaking through in the literary world with their stories, their voices, and everything about the great works that they're doing. So today we have a special treat for you today. We have Sadeqa Johnson, who is the author of The Yellow Wife, this book right here. If you don't have it, you definitely need it. And I'm going to remind you probably a few times tonight to definitely get the book Yellow Wife. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the story, her background, her inspiration for writing, you name it. So without further ado, Sadeqa Johnson's the international best-selling author of 4 novels. Her accolades include the National Book Club Award, the Phyllis Wheatley Book Award, the USA Best Book Award for Best Fiction. She is a Kimblio Fellow, former board member of the James River Writers, and a tall poppy writer. Originally from Philadelphia, and she currently lives near Richmond, Virginia, with her husband and 3 children. So I want to welcome Sadeqa Johnson.
Hi there. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm so excited. You have no idea. I've been waiting on this day.
Oh my goodness. This is so exciting to be here.
Well, thank you. I really hope that all of our viewers have the opportunity to read your book. It's been, I've seen it all over in book clubs. I've seen it on Bookstagram, on Facebook, and it constantly comes up. One of the things that pops up for sure is the cover. It's just beautiful. Like, just beautiful. It makes you want to grab it. What was the inspiration behind the cover here?
So, when I was working with Simon and Schuster, my publisher, on the cover, my original idea was a red calico dress. Because as you know, Mama wore a red calico dress. And so that's what I was kind of envisioning. And they kept sending me pictures and it just wasn't working. So we just started to play with the color, play with different ideas. And then when this lady with the dress popped up, because I knew it was going to be a woman in a dress so that you knew that it was a different time period. We were like, oh, that could work. And then if you look really closely in the picture, you can kind of see the city of Richmond. So when you see like the city, the backdrop kind of in the thread of her dress. So that was inspired by another book that I was reading. And I thought, oh, that's a good way to also kind of bring in the historical elements, right? So we did that. And then because she works in the loom, we were able to find that wonderful sewing machine.
If y'all can see that. Right there.
Yes. So that brought in all of the elements for the story. The key, I mean, all of it just has a little bit of symbolism to the book.
Well, I loved it. And one thing about the cover that I did love is that she didn't have a face. So you had to envision what she looked like in your mind. Usually if I see a cover, I already have a picture of what the main character looks like. This one, I had to make up my own character.
And that was intentional. I like that because what's happening in your head is going to be very different than what's happening in my head. And it needs to be right for the reader. And so I thought by no face, it would kind of let you use your imagination and go where you needed to go with the story.
Oh, yes. Well, it definitely did. I'm not going to lie. I definitely put myself there a few times. And then I was like, no, I don't want to be here. Let me tell you. So took my face off of her for a minute. Well, for those who are just popping in, if you have not read the book, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of it. Yellow Wife is a novel born on a plantation in Charles City, Virginia. Phoebe Dolores Brown has lived a relatively sheltered life. She's been shielded by her mother's position as the estate's medicine woman and cherished by the master's sister. She's set apart from the others on the plantation, belonging to neither world, really. She'd been promised freedom on her 18th birthday, but instead of the idyllic life she imagined with her true love, Essex Henry, Phoebe is forced to leave the only home she's ever known, and she finds herself thrust in the bowels of slavery at the infamous Devil's Half Acre, a jail in Richmond, Virginia, where the enslaved are broken, tortured, sold every day. And there, she's exposed not just to her jailer's cruelty, but also to his contradictions. So to survive, Phoebe has to outwit him, and she soon faces the ultimate sacrifice, which I like the synopsis because it gives you a little bit without telling you all the goodness that is in the book. And there are
Yes.
so many levels to it. So one part about the book towards the end, it has a lot of historical fiction. And how did you start to kind of dig into this uh, without too much going into detail about all of the story? What was your
Hmm.
first input into finding out a little bit about the history about the area?
I discovered the story of Yellow Wife pretty much by accident. My family had moved to the Richmond area in 2015, and we had some friends come down from New Jersey in 2016. I grew up in Philadelphia, but I lived in New Jersey for about 17 years. And when they came, we were like, we don't really know what to do with them. So someone suggested that we take them on the Richmond Slave Trail. The Richmond
Mm,
Slave Trail is about 2.5 miles in Richmond. It's along the James River, and it was unveiled in, I think it was unveiled in 2014 or 2015. But it has 17 different markers along the trail that details what it was like for the enslaved people as they came into Richmond.
mm,
Richmond was number two in the slave trade industry behind New Orleans, which was number one. So there's so much history here. And as we were walking on the trail, we had the kids take turns reading the markers. And they read one of the markers that talked about a place called the Lumpkins Jail. And it was described as a holding center and punishing center for enslaved people. Over 200,000 enslaved people passed through this jail between 1844 and 1865. And so that
wow.
was a lot of people. It was one of the most famous jails in Richmond. And the owner of the jail, they refer to him as the devil. And they called the Lumpkin Jail the Devil's Half Acre because he was so mean and so vindictive and so cruel. But
Mm,
what caught my attention was the fact that it said he was married to a Black woman, and her
mm,
name was Mary Lumpkin. And while he was one way in business with her and their 5 children, he was compassionate and kind. And I thought, ooh, what was life like for Mary Lumpkin? Because, we know she didn't have choice in marrying him or birthing his children. We knew she had no choice. And so I really just wanted to get into her head and figure out what life was like for her and what
hmm
life was like for her raising those 5 children on a half acre of land where there's a jail, where their
mm,
fellow enslaved people are being punished and families are being separated. There's the tavern where he conducts business in the hotel. There was the house they lived in, the kitchen house. And so, how is all of these things happening
hmm
on a half acre of land? And what kind of effect is that having on Mary Lumpkin and the children? And that was the beginning for me.
Wow. Well, the way that you wrote was, I'm a big, huge fan of historical fiction naturally, and I'm always drawn to it. But the thing that kind of caught me was there were lot of depth when it came to Phoebe. It wasn't just simply that she was going through all of these trials and tribulations, things were happening to her, but she was trying to figure out her own journey as to what
Mm.
she would do, not just for survival for herself, but for her children and for everyone else. And it kind of made me think too of the trope that Black women need to be strong. We need to
Mm.
constantly protect and take care of others. Was some of the thoughts that Phoebe had in her mind, was some of that from personal feelings as well, or where did you draw some of that from?
I mostly drew from the energy of the ancestors. I really felt that they wanted their story told. So when we were walking the trail, there's a section in Richmond that's been preserved called the Sacred African Burial Ground. And it's where the ancestors have been buried because
Mm,
when people died, when the enslaved people died at the Lumpkin jail, there was no ceremony for them. They literally waited for the bodies to pile up and then they just dumped them in the ground. And at one point, I think the city of Richmond, or maybe it was VCU, wanted to turn that area into a parking lot. But a
mm,
couple of people got together, different organizations, and they were able to preserve the land. and the grass looks different, like the color of the grass is a little bit different. And when we started to walk on it, we could feel this energy. You ever been to a place where you just feel it, like you
Yes.
just know that something has happened or something is calling you to this place? Well, that
Hmm.
was the experience I was having. And I remember feeling like this is a coming home. There's some sort of coming home feeling for us. And I thought the ancestors were waiting for us. And then I was like, I think the ancestors were waiting for me. They want me to tell their story. And it gave me chills. So I
Oh,
got all of that and got in my car. And when I got home, I couldn't stop looking up Mary Lumpkin, the Lumpkins jail, Robert Lumpkin, slavery enrichment, just trying to pull this story together because it was a different avenue for me. My first three books were contemporary women's fiction, right? So
hmm,
I wrote about things that I knew. My husband, we started off in the long distance relationship. My first novel, Loving to Carry On Back, long distance love
okay.
story. My second novel, a mom who's drowning in her skin, with three little small children at home. Well, I was that mom
Uh-huh.
with three small children at home. So this was the first time a story had kind of grabbed me that I didn't have anything to do with. And so it felt like a calling. It felt like I was charged by the ancestors to deliver this story.
I love that. It's funny you mentioned that because I've spoken to a lot of authors and their inspiration behind their books varies from something was similar that happened to them in life, something with their families, but it's not too often you find sort of a calling for a story to come about, especially one that is fictional, yes, but has a historical basis behind it. And I love the way you weave those two together. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, there's something else. The main character Phoebe, she is my favorite. I'm not even gonna lie. She is to me. She just was doing it all, but there was so much to her. Um, Mention a part here says Phoebe, in the state that she was in, she had even with everything going on, she had the knowledge to know the power of writing. She wrote down stories of ones that she encountered. She took down these historical notes, and it made me think too of that's sort of how I look at books. Like everything that is written for a purpose. And when you mention the ancestor speaking, there you go. Written
Yeah.
for a purpose for sure.
Yeah. And for me, when I was writing the story, it was, the story was inspired by Mary Lumpkin and it was inspired by the jail. But I also felt like it was up to me to honor as many voices as possible. So
Mm,
all of the names that I used in the book, they came off of slave ledgers. So Phoebe actually, when I was at a plantation, there was a ledger on the wall and I saw Phoebe spelled with a Y. And I was fishing around for a name for her and nothing was sticking. And characters will tell you when that is not their name. But when I saw Phoebe spelled with a Y, I thought, that's her
mm.
name. And so a few came off my family tree, but most of them came off of slave ledgers. And I tried to imagine what these characters were actually, what these real life people were going through so that I
Mhm.
could breathe life into them and they would be characters in the story.
So when you were going through in person, walking that trail, often I hear it's painful to revisit or to think about all of the atrocities that happened to the enslaved people during that time and to write it out. Was it difficult for you to write some of those scenes or to write out some of the details? Or how did you deal with that without feeling overwhelmed?
It was heavy. I mean, it was heavy. This is a part of our American history. It's the darkest days of American history. So it was heavy for sure. But really, what I kept telling myself as I was reading these stories, because, in my research, I came across slave narratives that were written by enslaved people. One of the
Hmm.
books I read was Incident in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacob. Another one was 50 Years a Slave by Charles Ball, where they're detailing things that happened to them or people who they knew or things that they saw. And I remember as I was taking in all of that and putting it into the story, what I kept saying to myself is if our ancestors could live through those very horrific moments, I mean, they lived it. the very least I could do is write about it. And the very least we can do as readers is read it, absorb it, and teach it and pass it on. Because if it was not for them, there would be no us. We stand on their
Mhm.
shoulders. And so it was really up to me to really give them a voice when they didn't have one.
Yes. And I love how even though there were some parts of the book that it was tough to read through some pieces
Mhm.
because it was so visual, but there was a humanity behind it because you saw the love her for Essex, you saw the love for her children that she had. You saw her resilience. Like you saw all of the different layers to it and it didn't seem as if all there is the bad. It seemed like
Yeah.
these are still people.
Yeah.
Everyone still has a story and the
Yeah.
story behind it, no matter how bad it is beautiful. And that's
And that
truly what
was
it was.
And that was intentional. So when I got to like maybe the second or third draft, as I was writing the book, I got to a place where I was stuck. And I called one of my writing mentors and I was explaining to her, I'm writing this slave book and I'm stuck. And she said, well, the reason why you're stuck is because you're not writing a slave book. The
Mm,
slavery is the backdrop of the story. That is the setting, that is the time period, that is the place. But at the heart of this story, there's motherhood, there's sacrifice, there's love. So she said, focus on that, and the story will
mhm.
start moving forward. And it was just a little switch. Once I made that little switch in my brain, everything started to take off.
I think that's what resonated with the readers too, because
Mm,
I've seen nothing but positive comments, nothing but love book since it came out. And I've heard of a lot of different books that tackle the topic of slavery and all different backgrounds, but not to this extent, not to where it feels as if it's not heavy when you finish it. I
mm,
don't feel as if
mhm.
I need to take a break from reading afterwards. So I love it. I love it. There was something that came up. It was a question. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, Phoebe's searching for a kind eye in the crowd when she was about to be sold or punished.
Mm,
She looked around and she didn't see anyone, any kind eye in any of the faces that she saw. And another reader that I came across, she said it felt really similar to the times we're in now, where
mm.
you may see a lot of people, especially after the instances that happened with George Floyd, you looked for the kindness or the empathy in faces that you were around all the time. And it's just like the veil has been lifted. And
Mm.
it's a good parallel between your story and what's happening today. Have you had any readers reach out to you or mention how the book has impacted their lives at all?
Yes, I get emails on a fairly daily basis. I just got an email from an 87-year-old woman who identifies as white and said that she had come up in a town at a time in California where blacks and whites didn't go to school together. And she was kind of walking me through her journey and telling me that she never looked at life through the eyes of an African American or the eyes of an enslaved person. And in reading Yellow White, she was able to get a different perspective. And like you said, she was able to see the human side of it, which she had never really thought about.
Yeah.
So I do feel like the story has definitely had an impact on people. I've had conversations now with people who probably would not have been comfortable,
Yeah.
in mixed situations where we're talking about race and we're talking about colorism and we're talking about that. The biggest thing about Yellow Wife is that this is not just Black history. This is America's history. And
Hmm.
so I didn't write it with just, us in mind. I wrote it for the globe so that we could all experience, what it was like for these people and understand that, is not going anywhere. As you said, you
Yeah.
see parallels. I was talking to Robert Jones Jr. He's the author of The Prophets,
Ooh.
which is
Yeah. Great
another
book.
really good book. I'm reading that right now, and it's so good that I have to like pause because I don't want to gobble it up. Like it's just
Yeah.
beautiful. But what he said to me was, he said, do you realize that the jail in Yellow Wife is the same as the mass incarceration of Black and
Mm,
brown men? And I didn't even, as I was
yeah.
writing it, I didn't think that. But it's like everything in the world informs your writing. It's all,
Yes.
everything is just in there. And history constantly repeats itself. And you see that when you read Yellow Wife, and like you said, the things that are going on, with George Floyd and the social uprisings, it's all tied together.
Hmm. And speaking kind of those parallels to the ingenuity of our people, period, was in just the thought of rubbing onions or things on your feet or on the horse's feet to throw off the scent, just using our brains to make the best of whatever situation to make us resilient were some of those things, those small things within the book. Where did you find those? Was that from your historical research too? Or I was thinking that the onions, my granny did that. Like, were they passed
Mm.
down from the family that you had?
Yeah. So a mix of different places. So definitely research. I love the series Underground. And
Mm,
that was
yeah.
out as I was writing Yellow Wife. And so I was always kind of taking notes on what they were doing. And I remember one scene when Journey was running, and I think she had said something about the onions and different plants that you can rub on and wildflowers or something. And so I was taking notes on that. And I was finding different things on Google. I
Mm,
Googled slave medicine recipes, and a whole journal came up. And so I was able to take different things from there and feed it into the story. And I find, as I'm reading the prophets now, it's so funny because there was a herb, oh gosh, one of the herbs, yarrow. Yarrow. I had
mhm.
never heard of yarrow until I was working on Yellow Wife. And it's in my book. And as I'm reading his book, yarrow is in his book as well. And so it was
Wow.
like all of this needed to come back to us. We needed to remember who we were, right? Because
Yeah.
it's been taken from us. It's not something that we followed. It's hard for us to get back to ourselves. But these are the
Hmm.
things that we came to this country doing, healing ourselves with herbs and onions and roots
Yeah.
and teas and medicines. And so that was the biggest joy for me as I was writing the book, was making these discoveries. And now I drink tea. I was always a coffee drinker,
There
but
you
and
go.
I still drink my coffee, but I try and have at least one cup of tea a day just for those medicinal purposes.
See, that's beautiful. Some of the things you had mentioned through there, I was just looking through like, my grandmother did that. Now I know where she got that from. You would think
Mm-hmm.
that some of those things are lost in translation, but it's like you feel it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
comes natural
You
to
just
you. So,
know. You just know
yeah.
it's right. You just know. My mother-in-law, whenever my kids are sick, she would always take some honey and then some lemon and heat it up, and then she squirted something else in it, and she would just spoon it to them, spoon it until they
Yeah.
felt better. And now my daughter does it. She's 13. So when she gets
Wow.
sick, she's in the kitchen pouring the honey and squirting the lemon, and she's doing it herself. So we got to
See,
pass these things down.
I love it. I love it. So has your family read the book as well?
Now listen, I got a 17-year-old son, a 15-year-old daughter, and a
Okay,
13-year
maybe.
old daughter, right? So I say to my 17-year-old, I say, oh, book came out in January. So I
Yeah.
says, oh, my book is out. Will you read it? He says, Mom, oh, I'm kind of busy right now. Maybe I'll do it over my summer break.
See, he's not gonna be happy until it's a movie. Then you want to read my book. Like,
Then you want to come to the movie premiere with me.
yeah,
But you hadn't
exactly.
even read the book. So the 17 and the 15-year-old promised it was going to be on their summer reading list. So check back with
Okay.
me in September. By then, hopefully they have read it. But the adults have read it. My husband, my in-laws, my parents, my
What
sids,
do I think
they've
about it?
all read the book. They loved it. When I first got the idea of Yellow Wife, I was telling my dad about it, and he says, why do you have to write about those things? And I was like, I have to write about what's in my heart. Like I can't
Yeah.
follow the trends or, like, because then I'm not being true to my gift. Like I have to write what's put into my heart. And so while that is a difficult period of history, it's what I was charged to do at this point. And so I had to do it. And so he got over it. So once he actually read it, he was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Glad the family's reading it and loving it. So cool. Well, there was make sure you go through my notes. Now, Phoebe's mindset was something that was passed down from her mother as well. The mind that even though she was enslaved, she was not a slave. She was a young woman. She was who she was, and she kept that and passed that down to her kids. And without me going too in depth with her relationship between her mom and the kids and all that good stuff, um, what was your thoughts behind writing about that? Because it seems as if not everyone had that same mindset in on the plantation or even at the jail.
Mm. Phoebe's mother her mother, so Phoebe's mother was the enslaved, Phoebe's mother's mother was the enslaved person who came actually over on the ship from Africa. And I visualized that woman having been a queen that had been snatched and put on the boat and brought here with no knowledge of what was going on. And so I imagined her, and her name was Queen Viney Brown. And I named her after one of my ancestors because my grandmother, my
Oh,
maternal grandmother, told me about my I don't know if it was my great aunt. I think it was like my great great aunt. And she said she was so feisty and she was so fierce. And I thought, oh, she gets a spot in my book. And so I visualized Queen Viney Brown coming over from Africa, but haven't have been brought up a certain way
mm-hmm.
and refused to be completely broken, even though she was in a broken situation, being an enslaved person. When she had her daughter, that's what she whispered to her daughter. And so when
Yeah.
Ruth had Phoebe, that's what she whispered to Phoebe. And so it was another way of me passing story and strength along generation after generation after generation.
Well, there's definitely uh, it's an empowerment type of book as well for women and mothers, and because it even has me thinking too some of the parts where it spoke about beauty being a curse or being mindful of the way that you appear, being mindful of the way that you act is still true today, even for especially for young Black girls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how would you, what would you say to the younger you who was coming up? If you could tell
Mm-hmm.
the younger you something.
I would tell me to just be patient because I am still kind of impatient. I wanted to like move and shake. But I think I've grown a bit and I see that God has a plan for me and that I'm not supposed to go ahead of him, that I'm supposed to wait and let him kind of move and then I move. And so I've
Mhm.
gotten that now. Like I'm not the director of this play. I'm just in the drive, I'm in the passenger seat. So I think
Yeah,
I would tell my younger me, like, just be patient. All things, what is for you is for you. There's nothing you can do about that. It's coming your way. Just be
yeah,
patient, and not be so hard on myself. Because I know growing up, I was like so hard on myself. I wanted everything to be perfect and line up in a certain way. And when it didn't, my feelings were hurt, hurt, hurt.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
would say, just be patient, be patient. All things are coming your way.
It's funny you mentioned it because that's sort of how Phoebe felt. Everything should have
Mm-hmm.
lined up in her way,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't. Life happened
Mm-hmm.
and took her on a different journey, but she
Yeah.
found a way to make it all happen. So, did you always want to be a writer, or how did you come into this space? Because this book is a treasure for sure, but how
Mm,
did you
thank
get
you.
to here? Like, for
Yeah.
those who are aspiring writers, give us some tips.
So I started off actually as an avid reader. I was the kid who went to the library on Monday. I checked out 7 books and I read a book a day. In fact, I read so much that when I was in 7th grade, I would slip my books behind my textbook. So instead
Oh
of
wow!
paying attention to 7th grade math, I was reading Sweet Valley High books. So I was always reading. I wanted to be an actress when I was a kid. So I went to
Really?
theater school. I went to college as a theater major, but I then switched to communications at some point because I started to get nervous that I wouldn't be able to get a job. So
Yeah,
I switched
yeah.
to communications, and it was in college that I started kind of fooling around with writing. And because I was such a big reader, it just kind of came natural to me. When I
Mm.
got my first job at Scholastic, I worked on the first 3 Harry Potter books. I was one of the publicists who worked
Oh,
on the book.
wow.
So while I was there, I was writing. I started working on this novel that never saw the light of day, but it felt like I was doing something I was supposed to be doing. So I started my second novel. I got my next job at G.P. Putnam Sons, and I start working with adult authors like Catherine
Okay.
Coulter and Rebecca Walker and B.B. Moore Campbell and Bishop T.D. Jakes. And while I was with these authors,
Oh, I think you froze there.
am I good?
I hear you, but now you're good.
Oh,
There we go. Oh, and you froze just again, right when you were coming back.
oh, okay. Hang on. Let me make sure my,
It was just getting good.
yeah, I'm good on the internet. How am
Okay,
I looking
now
now?
I hear you, but you're not moving. But now you're
Oh,
kind of moving.
okay.
Okay, I think we're coming back slowly, slowly.
Okay. So while I was working at Putnam, I was picking these authors' brains and I was trying to figure out, like, how do you become an author? Like, what is it
Hmm.
that you have to do? And at the same time, I was working on that first novel, and I would write on the morning the train, and I would close my door every day at 4 o'clock, and I would put what I wrote into the computer. And I did that every day, every day, every day. And so it got to the point where I had a full manuscript. I had my son, and I told my husband, I said, listen, I have this manuscript. I'm connected now because I've worked in publishing for a couple of years. So I'm going to get an agent. I'm going to sell this book. I'm going to be a New York Times
Uh-huh.
bestseller, and I'm going to quit my job. So he's
Goals.
like, oh. So I did all of that, except my agent couldn't sell my first novel. One by one, every editor told me no. And I
Mm.
was distraught, right? Depressed to the highest level because, I had a plan and the plan didn't go the way I wanted it. So I was having dinner with my husband and he said, what is it that we need in order to put this book out ourselves? And I said, well, I need an editor. And he said, well, let's just hire an editor. And the thought had never occurred to me that if I just tried one little thing, things would start to fall into place. And I
Yeah.
did. And we started a publishing company. I put Love in a Carry-On Bag out. We went up and down the East Coast, and I'm selling the book at every book signing, every outdoor festival, every hair show. I mean, I'm literally at the Harlem Book Festival in like 95 degrees, selling my book,
Wow.
sweating off my makeup. But it worked. I won the Phyllis Wheatley Award. And when I finished my second novel, we were able to sell it to St. Martin's Press. So that was kind of the beginning of me now turning into publishing. So I went from
Yeah.
the author that nobody wanted to publish. When I had Second House from the Corner, I had 3 editors who wanted to purchase the book. So I had choice. So it was just being persistent, just staying the course, not giving up on myself, believing that the calling was higher on my
Hmm.
life than what I could see, and that I just had to keep going. Don't quit before the miracle happens. I hear that, and it's true because I sold both books to St. Martin's Press, Second House from the Corner, and then there was me. And then there was a pause because my editor left publishing. And so my
Mm.
books were an orphan. I discovered the story of Yellow Wife, and now we got to do that all over again. And I landed with Simon and Schuster. So it was a
Wow.
journey. It was definitely a journey.
Wow. But thank you for your transparency because there are a lot out there who think it's once you get that no, that's it. Maybe I'm not meant to be a writer, or it's so hard, I'm never going to make it through. You went from here to here to here and back again. And now we
Yeah.
have this beauty for sure.
Which which was a complete departure. I mean, writing contemporary fiction and then switching to historical fiction, it was really scary. But it was something that was saying, you got to try it. You got to try it. You got to try it.
Yeah.
And I told one of my girlfriends, and she said, Sadeqa, the thing that scares you most is what you're supposed to be doing next. And that
Mm.
just opened up the window a little
That's,
bit and said, give it a try.
that is a word for sure.
Mm.
So what's next for you? Because I can see this as a movie. I honestly can.
Mm.
If they haven't already tapped you, I
Let's boost
see it
that
as a movie.
energy up.
Yes,
Yes, let's get us a movie
yes.
deal.
I see this as a movie for sure. But if not, or if also there's
Mhm.
something else, what do you see yourself doing next?
So I'm working on my fifth novel right now. It is another historical fiction.
Okay.
It takes place between 1947 and 1951. So not as far back in our history, but
Hmm.
still a portion of history where we're dealing with segregation and we're dealing with colorism and we're dealing with socioeconomics. So I'm exploring some of the same themes, but in a different time period with brand new characters.
Okay. If you ever need a character name, Shaylin's available. Feel free.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yes, keep that in mind. You may find a need for me. Well, what are some of your inspirations for your writing? Since you started contemporary fiction and went to historical fiction, were there writers out there that really spoke to you when you were growing up reading?
When I was growing up reading, let me first say that I read so much in high school that my friends would steal my novels and they would hide them from me because they wanted me to come outside and jump double dutch. And I would go hide in a classroom so that I
Wow.
could read. Yes, total book nerd. But some of the authors that really inspired me as a kid, the first book that I read that really I saw myself on the page was Mama by Terry McMillan.
Mm.
That was the first book that I thought, "Oh my goodness." Yeah, that's the first one that I can remember was Mama by Terry McMillan. I would say The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Also, Maya Angelou, all four of her books, but the whole collection
Wow.
of her autobiography books. Those were ones that I remember reading as a kid. Man Child in the
Okay.
Promised Land by Claude Brown. My dad got that for me, and the autobiography of Malcolm X. I had to have a little bit of everything as I was
Yeah.
growing up. But those were books that really stick out for me in my childhood. And then I got a little older and I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora
Hmm.
Neale Hurston and kind of got into her. And so for a long time, once I discovered African American literature, it was all I would read because when I was really young, I couldn't find anything by Black people. And so there was a
Yeah.
period of my life where that's all I read. When Bernice McFadden came out with Sugar, oh my
Ooh.
goodness,
Got
I
that right
love
there.
that book.
Oh, I love that's so beautiful. It's funny you mentioned that because that's really how Book Mecca started. I love reading. My two girls, they're 15 and 16 now. We had started like reading challenges and started reading, and my oldest would read all the time. But she fell in love with one Black author and wanted to read the series, couldn't find it. Went to a library, couldn't find it. Went to a bookstore, they'd have maybe one or two copies or back orders. And so we started looking, just took like a list each time, and we look up these Black authors and see if they had them. Same thing, two or three copies, a few at a time. So we said, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to make sure people know the stories exist, who these authors are, where they are, how you can find them. Have one place you can find all the books together if you want to, but just
Mm,
make a safe space for Black authors and not be hidden under the veil of people of color or Black History Month. We Black,
mm,
just Black authors.
mm,
So that's
mm.
sort of how
I,
we came to
I
be.
I applaud you for that. I mean, that is just beautiful. That is a beautiful story.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's now I think I have too many books. Do you have a big TBR pile of books as well, just lined up?
So I'll tell you what's happening to me is that since Yellow Wife has come out, now I'm getting requests to blurb other books prior to them
Oh,
coming out.
yeah.
So I have a list of books that I want to read, and then I have a list of books that people are asking me to read, which is an honor because 2 years ago nobody was asking me to read anything,
Uh,
so that's an honor. But it's also like, okay, how am I supposed to read all this and write a book? So I started doing audiobooks. Just this year
mm,
was the first time I do both. So I'm
okay.
listening to a book and I'm reading a book. So that way I'm doing two books at a time. And that's helped me pick up my pace a little bit.
I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if my brain can do two things.
I didn't I didn't think so either. I didn't but so I listened to my audiobook. So my writing schedule is like this for the writers out there. I normally, and I'm very fortunate that this is my full-time job. So I wake up, I get my daughter onto the bus, and I normally am writing in the morning, somewhere from 7:30 to about 1 o'clock or so. I try
Mm,
and log. Right now, I'm trying to log between 4 to 6 hours, but don't be alarmed by that, because it's not always the case. Sometimes I write 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day. If you're just starting off, start with 10 minutes a day. The whole
mm,
point is that you show up for your writing. But
yeah.
I try and write to about 1 or 1:30, and then I go for what I call a walk run, and that's about an hour. So that helps me kind of get the story out of my body. I'm
Hmm.
listening to another story, so I'm kind of, it's like a transitional time for me, so
Okay.
that when I come home, I could take a shower. Now I'm present for my family. I could check homework and cook dinner or whatever I need to do, or get ready for, wonderful interviews in the
Yeah.
evening with people like you. So it's kind of my transition time. And that's when I'm usually listening to an audiobook.
I love the technique and how you have it down pat. I'm gonna work on me. We're gonna see if I can come
Mm-hmm.
out with something for sure. It kind of speaking of your reading, you'd mentioned you're an avid reader and you have all these people who want you to read the books. Do you have a Nook book Nook area that's comfy as just for you? And what does that look like? What does that feel like?
I wish I had a comfy
No?
book nook.
Oh, we
No
got to get
comfy
you a
book
book
nook.
Nook.
I do. I normally read. I have a little sofa in my bedroom, and sometimes I sit there with like a little footrest. Sometimes I read in bed. Sometimes I read on the sun porch, but I don't have like that, like, ooh, with my blanket and I'm all
Yes.
like ready to go.
Yeah.
No.
We
I'm
got
gonna
to
have to
get
put
you a
that on
book
my
Nook.
vision board. Yes.
Yes, you need some sage, you need some little plants, you need
Yes. And you know
all
what the
that.
thing is I think it's the lighting in my house. I probably need to invest in some new lighting, because there's a couple of spots that could work, but the
Hmm.
lighting is bad. So I usually find a spot to curl up wherever there's good lighting, because I'm getting to the age where I'm having a hard time seeing. It's breaking my heart.
You know what helps? I'm gonna show you what helps right here. These little lights right here goes right on the
Oh.
book and they clip
Oh.
on. You don't need the light.
Yes. So thank you. And I bought one of those and I did not know what it was for. I thought that was a ring light for the computer, so that when I'm
It
doing
is.
interviews, but it didn't illuminate the space. So I sent it back, but I wish I had not, because now I know that I could just put that on my
Yeah,
book.
I use it for everything. If I'm reading, especially if I don't want to let the other little people in the house know I'm up, I will use the
Mhm.
light so they
Mhm.
don't bother
Mhm.
me and let me do what I want to do. But
Oh,
it's
that's a good idea.
yes, yes. Oh, so let me also ask you too. Usually, when I talk to authors who read, they also do so many other things as well besides writing and plays or you name it. Are you involved in any other creative acts as well too, painting or anything?
Mm. I think I would like to paint. I always look at the classes at the museum, and I have not pulled the trigger yet. So I think once my kids are kind of out the house, I'm in that in between stage with parenting. So they need me, but they don't need me the way they did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of chauffeuring people around, and their schedule is my schedule. So I don't really have all that extra time. I would say the things that I'm mostly focused on, of course, is the writing. I'm
Hmm.
also a public speaker, so I do different
Okay.
organizations. I do inspirational speaking. I do.
Let's
I'm an
do that.
author coach, a writing coach too. So I do some writing classes at Drexel University in the MFA program. So I'm one of the packet exchange instructors there, and I've done like workshops, writers workshops, and that sort of thing. So those are my normal lanes. But just
Okay.
for my own personal, I meditate every day. I have to
Mm.
meditate, because that just brings me my own, and it just
Hmm.
brings me clarity and just gets things going on the right foot, for the day. I also hike. That's like my new passion since
Really?
COVID.
I just started
I
that.
I have hiking boots.
Me
I'm
too.
like, I'm serious. Yes. We're gonna have to hike together when I come to
I mean,
Texas.
now I'm going to give a shout out. Okay. And I don't give too many shout outs, but I'm giving a shout out to Curvy by Nature. It's a nonprofit here in Texas, and it's for big girls or curvy women. who are enjoying nature and hiking. So once a month, they all go out and hike, and we have apples and we talk about nature and our lives. And I've only been once, and but I love it already. I've already been telling everybody about it. So I went and bought hiking
Ooh.
boots and got a stick and everything.
Oh,
So
you are ready.
I loved it.
It's a beautiful thing, though. It's a beautiful thing to commune with nature. So my group in Richmond is called Black Girls Hike RVA. So I'm going to give a plug
Ooh,
too. And
okay.
they are amazing. They do 2 hikes a month. And same thing. I love the fact that there's the women, whenever we go, they're all ages, we're
Mm-hmm.
all shades, and we are all sizes. So, and no woman is ever left behind. So if you have no workout experience, still come,
Yeah.
because somebody's always going to wait for you on the trail and make sure you get to the other side. And it's just such a beautiful, every time we hike together, I just have this natural high for like the next 2 days.
Yes. Maybe that's the because what part of you're from Richmond? Not from Richmond.
Yeah, so I live
Originally from
near
Richmond.
Richmond. Uh-huh.
So is
Originally
it
from
really
Philadelphia. I got to
Philadelphia?
say
Okay.
originally from Philadelphia because my dad will get really mad at me. So I'm originally from Philadelphia, but right now I live near Richmond.
I think that need for nature is just always there. Feeling connected to the ground is like,
Hmm.
especially
Yes,
when you're out there. Is I love that.
yes,
Yes, when you come to Texas, we can go on a hike, taking an RV.
yes.
Let me know. We'll be
I
there.
will let you know. Yes, I would love that. I actually started writing in I would say the last 2 weeks, I've been writing in the backyard just because that connection with nature has been so wonderful. The only thing is that the sun starts to shift throughout the day. And so,
Yeah.
when you have those umbrellas up, the umbrella doesn't
Uh-huh.
move, but the sun moves. So I'm constantly dragging my computer to the other side of the table, trying to find a spot where the sun's not hitting me in the eye. But just being outside and hearing the birds chirp and walking across the grass with my feet
Yeah.
and just being connected. It's important to connect and to ground ourselves, especially
Yes.
for creative people, because sometimes we could just be like floating in the sky. So we
Just
have to
move
find a
it.
way to ground ourselves. Yes.
I love that. I know about once a I didn't know I was doing that for years, but I knew about once a month when I was younger, I would have to, I'm from a little bitty town in East Texas. So about once a month, I would go home and I would have to walk in the grass. I needed to be out and just touch
Mm.
some trees or something. And I would feel as if all of the living in the city and the stress had kind of like wiped away. And I'm good for another month. And then a month later, I would
Mm.
come back and I'd want to touch some dirt again. So
Hmm.
I didn't understand that's what that was. But
Hmm.
uh,
Yes.
all
Yes.
y'all who's
E-
watching, touch some dirt. It'll do you
that's
some
right.
good.
So East Texas, are you a fan of Attica Locke?
I love her. You know what? I interviewed Timby Locke. She was my third interview I had. And I read her book from scratch. Love her.
How was it?
Love.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't read that one yet, so I'll have to get it.
It's great. And it's being turned
Oh,
into a movie.
oh
Like
wow.
it's funny because well, not every, but pretty close to almost all the authors I've interviewed, their books are either being turned into movies, turned into series, or something like that. Yeah, exactly. And Tim Locke, Miss Marita Gold and her books been picked up.
I
Kimberly
love
Latrell
Marita.
Johnson. Who else did I have? Britt Bennett had her. I mean, it's just been like, oh, this is just divine timing. I am loving it.
Yes.
Love seeing
Well, you
everybody
must
glow up.
just be, and you must just be like the energy boost or something. You probably have the connection to God, and you're just raining the blessings down on your authors.
I just love to see everybody glow up,
That's
especially
right.
Black authors, because I love movies, I love music and all that as well. But the backstory behind it are the writers. You are the backstory behind it. I don't want you to get lost by the editors and whoever the directors may be and what their vision is, because the story is always better than the movie anyway. So I want people to
Yeah, I
read it.
agree. Yes, I agree. That happens to me. I get caught out there. I'll go to I'll read the book first, and then pre-COVID, go to the movies all excited and be like,
It's
"What was
never,
that? What was that?"
never is good. And I usually try to do like I try to read the book first. If I don't, and I watch the movie and then I read the book, it kind of makes me feel better about why I didn't like the movie. Because then I'm like, that's
Mm,
why it wasn't the book. That's what it was
mhm,
for sure. So when you are grounding yourself, meditating, and enjoying time with your family, what is your go-to song you listen to get yourself
mm.
in the groove?
I'll tell you my go-to person because any song by her just makes me happy. It's Erica Badu.
Ooh, yeah.
That's my soul sister. Yes. Anything by Erica Badu. And you know, when I'm really trying to get my super chill on, did you see when it was Erica Badu and Jill Scott on Versus?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
that is like food for my spirit. Like when I say, okay, I'm about to run me a bath, I'm dropping everything I could find in that tub, and then I'm going to put on Erica and Jill Scott and just listen to them love up on each other and listen to those songs. I mean, it is just, it is food. That is food for my soul.
Yeah, I
That's
swear you
my
got my
thing.
playlist. Yes, that's my
Hmm.
Jill Scott and Erica and my two ladies too. Pretty much.
Hmm.
And the sad part is, well, it's not sad for me, but maybe for the kids, this is all they hear. And they know all the songs now, whether they want to or not. They know that
Hmm. You bringing them up right. You bringing them up right.
you got to. You got to ingrain them early. But I digress. I know we don't have a whole lot of time. I'm just enjoying this conversation so much with you. You are definitely a kindred, close spirit. I'm loving this for
Oh.
sure. But a lot of the characters that you had in your book were so dynamic and so unique. Was there a character that you wrote about in Yellow Wife that you just didn't enjoy writing? There's
Mm.
always one who just struggles. I think it was one of the authors I interviewed. She said that she didn't even want to put this person in the book because it was hard to write them, not but based on what they did, but just she didn't like them that much. Was there a character that just didn't sit well with you?
The jailer was a hard character to write, not because he didn't sit well with me, but more so I just had a hard time understanding him because he
Mm,
was really a man of two faces. So to be able to see the tender side of him and to see the vindictive evil side of him and just kind of toe that line constantly through the book, I would
yeah.
say that was kind of difficult. And I know that like when the book was coming back to me, those were usually my editorial comments was like, we need to see both sides of him. We need to see
Hmm.
both faces. And I needed to be on that line. So he was more difficult to write because of his contradictions. The
Mm.
character that surprised me the most was Mrs. Delphina.
Hmm.
And I think it would be very easy for me to say that I didn't like her
Yeah, I
or,
didn't like her.
that she was right, because most of the readers do not like her. But I actually really enjoyed writing her. I enjoyed creating her. I enjoyed getting into her head. I remember
Really?
reading a book about what it was like for white women who lived on plantations because
Hmm.
we never really get their side of the story, right? And so I
Yeah.
needed to make her three-dimensional. We always get the wicked
Hmm.
mistress of the plantation, but we never get the why behind the
Hmm.
wickedness. And so in some of my research, I was able to kind of dissect what it was like to be a white woman of privilege on these plantations and the
Huh.
things that they emotionally felt. I mean, they were jealous, right? Because their husbands were lusting after these slave women and they couldn't understand. They would rationalize that it was, to create a profit because
Hmm.
more enslaved people meant more money, but they knew it was something deeper than that. And there was a deep jealousy, like, why am I not good enough? Why is that? Why are you lusting behind, so and
Mm.
so? And so it was there was a they had some additional complexities to them that was very fulfilling for me in a way to figure her out, even though she was the villain.
Yeah, I did not like her. That she seemed way too familiar to me. Just she remind me of yeah. So
Mm.
I did not care for her very much. But everyone else in the book, I was like, okay, I see where they're coming from. Her, I was like, I
Mm.
don't know about you, but that's all right. Well, we are coming up on our last 5 minutes. Is there anything that you want to tell our viewers or readers about your previous books, your current book, anything that you want to know about you, what should they know?
Well, first, I want to just encourage people who want to be writers because it is not an easy job. I was almost in tears today. Okay, today my writing day did not go the way I was planning
Mm,
it. They were not doing what I needed them to do. I was just feeling like woe was me, and so that happens. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get up tomorrow and try it again, and that tomorrow is not going to be a better day because I am, because I'm a writer. And if you know in your gut, in your heart, that you are being called to write something, just do it. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to quit your job. You just have to make time for it. We make time for the things that we want to do, right? So my writing teacher would tell me 10 minutes before bed. Start with writing 10 minutes before bed for a week. And before you know it, you're going to look up and it's 20 minutes before bed. And then you up it to 30 minutes before bed. And then you look and you have 20 pages in front of you. So just keep going. You have to make the commitment to yourself to say, this is my writing time. It is precious. You need to carve it out. You need to shut your door. You need to turn your
mhm,
cell phone off. You need to take the
mm.
internet off your computer so that you're not getting all those little dings and
Things.
distractions. But you just need to keep your butt in the chair and do it. And trust me, the magic will the magic will come. So that's about writing. So on
Okay.
me, as you mentioned, I'm the author of 4 novels. So my first book is called Love in a Carry-On Bag. That was
I'm
the
gonna get
one I
that.
had to That's the one I self-published, but don't think self-published mean it wasn't good, because as if you've been in this interview for a while, you know that I'm very meticulous about things. And
Uh-huh.
so one of the things I said was that when we were putting Love in a Carry-On Bag out, I didn't want you to see it in the bookstore and know which one was the Simon and Schuster book and which one was the 12th Street Press book. I wanted them to have that same feel so that you
Mm.
would want it like you wanted a traditionally published book.
I
My
like
second
that.
novel, yeah, that was my goal. That was my goal. So my second novel is Second House from the Corner. That's about a woman who gets married with secrets and what happens when they start to come out of her closet.
Mm.
My third novel is called And Then There Was Me, and that's about a woman who suffers from an eating disorder, and she's
Mm.
in an unhappy marriage and what she has to do to bring herself up. And that book in particular is near and dear to my heart because I don't think in the Black community we talk about women like us having eating
Yeah.
disorders. So that book is that book is out. And actually, Second House from the Corner and Then There Was Me is out in paperback. You can pick it up at Walmart when you go grocery
Okay.
shopping.
All
And then, of
right.
course, we have Yellow Wife, which is an international bestseller.
Whoop,
It was
whoop.
on the Canadian bestsellers list for 2 weeks. So that was my
Congratulations.
little, yes. So that was great. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Sadeqa Says. So please find me on Instagram. On Facebook, I'm Sadeqa Johnson. And if you have read Yellow Wife, if you would please go and write a review on Amazon, on Goodreads,
Yes.
on BookBub, all of that really, really matters. So if you could write a review, tell a friend, tell an auntie, share it with your book club. If you do have a book club and you would like me to come and talk about Yellow Wife, send me a message at my website, which is sadiqajohnson.net. There's a whole book club page, and there's a form that you can fill out to have me come and speak with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been a honor, a pleasure to have you on. And definitely when you finish your next book, let me know so we can get you back on here. We'll love it. Be bigger and better.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing. I love the way that you are uplifting Black books, Black authors. I mean, we need people like you because it's a hard business. It's a hard business.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
thank you on behalf of all of my author colleagues. I thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to having you again. So, for all you viewers out there, I always end with a quote. Sometimes it's random. Some I do the one that speaks to me. So, the one today is Patricia Hill Collins, and it says, "Challenging power structures from the inside, working the cracks within the system, however, requires learning to speak multiple languages of power convincingly." And I felt as if Phoebe and Yellow Wife definitely did that. I feel as Black women, we definitely do that. And as our community, we are constantly speaking all these languages, but we are also powerful when we do it, no matter the
Mm,
language we speak. So I thank you all for being here, and
thank
I will
you.
give you back your evening. Have a wonderful night.
Awesome.